welcome to the Sanctuary, a safe space to speak from the heart. I'm your host, Israel, and my guest today is writer, creator, woodworker, my friend, Dom, my friend, Alex. Thanks for coming to the Sanctuary today.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, first off, your content is amazing. I'm a huge fan, and I want to start with what's the kink origin story? How did you get in kink?
You know, I've been vanilla most of my life. I'm almost 40, and so I've only been doing this maybe 10 years or so. And I liked, again, we call it vanilla, just regular, but you imagine, like, missionary, normal sexual interactions, and I loved it, right? And I didn't think anything of it. I really didn't know there was more. Or, you see the videos or these porns or whatever, and you're like, oh, this is weird. This is like not my thing. So, but I think the first time I realized that I kind of enjoyed something was, putting my hand, like, when you're with your girlfriend or whatever, and you're like, oh, let me try choking you and pulling your hair or whatever, just very lightly, just for fun. And the feel, I remember the moment. I put my hand around her throat. Again, wasn't trying to cut off her air, but just like the feeling of power and enjoyment and pleasure that brought. I think that was, and again, I was in my late 20s at that time, so I had been having sex for a decade, and it didn't cross my mind. So from there, nothing, for a couple of years, nothing really happened until after a divorce. I just was like, let's explore some things, let's try some things new, and I found just the experiences and the kind of people that I met through doing BDSM. And so what started out as a small, like one or two toys, ended up becoming a dungeon. And so, yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, you do have a dungeon. We'll get to that. But how did you find the community?
I think honestly through just meeting other people. So, FetLife, the website you found me through, I think I joined maybe 7 years ago. So there was at least a couple of years where I just didn't have a community or didn't think of it. And it was actually meeting women who had more experience than me, who introduced me to other people, other communities, and said, oh, you're really good at this. Maybe you should reach out to these people or this community, or have you tried FetLife or these other websites? And so I did, which then ended up in so most of this that was occurring was in Phoenix, Arizona, and there's a wonderful community there, and a kind of like a YMCA place called Apex. It's called the Arizona Power Exchange, and it's just big 2-story community center for people who do BDSM, and yeah, met a lot of people there.
I'm like, it's one thing to kind of start, and then it's one thing to start building. Like, did you form connections right away, or like having partners right away?
You mean like sexually, or sorry, not sexually, but you mean like with female partners, or you mean like other male people I met in the community, or males
Female
and female?
partners.
Um, I think, right after a breakup, for example, when this was really like started getting going, there wasn't much of a connection or much of a thought behind it. It was just trying to rebound, as they say. But I realized very quickly, and obviously make through a lot of mistakes, that if you don't have a connection, if you don't have an intimacy, then nothing works. And so one thing I like to tell, especially the submissive people, is I have to trust you as much as you have to trust me. It has to go both directions. Otherwise,
Mm.
you're letting me put your life in my hands, but, my hand around your throat or whatever it might be. But I
Mm.
have to know that I can trust to do that to you. Because really, there's
Mhm.
nothing. I mean, if you want to go on the front end, there's nothing stopping a woman from me, after doing BDSM, saying, I'm going to go to the cops and say this man hit me and abused me, right? So it does take a lot of inherent trust. Because I know some DOMs who have them write a document or take a video of them agreeing to these things, and I get that from a liability standpoint. But I'm more just, I was raised with my father's a jeweler, and they would trade in millions of dollars of diamonds or whatever with a handshake. And so
Mm.
no contracts. It was just reputation. And so the kind of connections that I build are based off just uh, emotional intimacy and not a liability or fear of legal retribution or stuff like that. Sorry, that was a long
Mm.
response to your
No,
question, but
no, no. Yeah, yeah, no, totally. I get that, right? I think experience teaches you that, but um, on a personal note, how do you read the person enough to know, or are there some steps that you have to go through to build this trust that okay, this is someone I can share this out of myself with, or something similar?
so so I mean, me and my girlfriend, my partner, met with a new woman last night. If you want to hear that whole story of how that occurred, I can give that to you now with the
That might
assessment.
help. Yeah.
So very interesting. A man on FetLife. This is how it all started. A man on FetLife, a dominant, in his late 50s or early 60s, whatever, contacted me. Said, "I love your content," and for the most part, I just ignore them. Um, because but he was polite and nice about it. I start speaking to him. He tells me he has a background. He has a PhD. He's a professor himself, and so we start talking. And he says, "Hey, would you like to have? Can I come over with my slave, and can we play and whatever?" So that occurs. I meet with him first for coffee. We talk, and then he comes over and we do whatever. And then this is like a couple weeks ago. And then he says, "Hey, I have someone I think might work well for you. I'm too old for her, but you might be the right age." And so he gives me her FetLife information. I contact her, and we just have a back and forth through text. Um, and she sees my profile, she's interested, and so we just have a back and forth of, hey, answer these questions. The questions are like, what are you looking for, and why do you want this, and what are your experiences, and so there's just a long. What I am looking for is not. I want to be. I want to. I don't know how vulgar can I be vulgar here in this.
Yes, please. Yes, yes, yes.
So, a lot of women are like, "Oh, tie me up, beat me, force me to come, all these things, make stretch me out and all these." Okay, like it doesn't mean anything to me. What I'm looking for is, why do you want this, and why do you want me? What is the meaning? Because I can fuck someone, they can fuck someone. Who cares, right? It's I'm looking for, is there an end goal and a benefit? And in this case, right, I have my partner who, she wanted to learn how to dominate women, right? Because I dominated her and we went through all the training. And so this woman I'm speaking to, I ask her, would you like to be dominated by a couple? And she says yes. And so we met with her for dinner last night. And actually, I have it in front of me. We went through about uh, 20 pages of an assessment I have that asks things. My background is as a therapist, right? So I ask her about her family history, her medical history, her psychiatric history, her medical issues in terms of flexibility. I mean, all these kind of things. And then we talk about like, what are your fantasies and why do you have these fantasies? When did they occur? And so, what I'm looking for to kind of more answer your question is, are you trying to, because BDSM is very violent inherently. Are you trying to perpetuate a past trauma that you had, a mental illness that you currently have, right? This woman wants to be tied up and beaten and punched in the face, and literally she wants to be like brutalized.
Mm.
And so I need to know why. Why do you want this? Did something happen in your past that you're trying to recreate? Again, this is the psychologist part of me, because I will not do that. I've done that before unknowingly, and I hate that. And so in talking with her, um, I can see that she has a good sense of what she likes and why she likes it. And it's not because of her past issues, because we always have them. So I'm just looking for me, it's about mental health. Um, and so I just try to make sure that they're mentally healthy and that what we're going to do is good for them. And I think my process of asking those questions with the person leads them to trust me and for me to trust them more. And so I think just that process is good enough in and of itself to kind of understand and create the intimacy we needed, to that even at that point, after talking for 2 hours about her assessment, I could have tied her up and beaten the crap out of her and we both would have been happy. No, I didn't do that because I have a kind of a procedure I follow where I don't do anything severe the first time I meet someone. But that's how I think trust is built and how I form intimacy with people.
Mm. I mean, you're lucky that you have this background of being a psychologist. And how much did that factor into creating this assessment and documents that you have?
Because, you know, when I first started, I had no I it wasn't a thought. And what I ended up finding out, you know, we would just meet up and do what we would do. Um, and I, you know, for example, I would touch a person a certain way or say a certain thing and they would have a bad reaction. And of
Mm,
course, the person in me wants to know like what's going on. And so we'd have a conversation. And what I realized is a lot of dominants would just move on. They wouldn't ask why. They don't care. They just want what they want. And you know, I have this bias of kind of throwing in all doms into one basket. That's not true. But what I realized was um, I was hurting people accidentally by not asking questions, by not knowing about what their history was and what they liked and what they didn't like. And a lot
mm,
of women, I'm speaking, you know, obviously there's men too, but I generally am with women. A lot of the women um, didn't realize why they reacted negatively until I kind of inquired and found in the background. So slowly it was just a verbal, like I just had some questions to ask them over time. And I realized I should write these down because I'll forget. Because there was a time
mm.
where I was seeing maybe two or three different women a week. And so, you know, kind of had to have just as my own ethics, and I love assessments on the professional side. So it just started to make sense. And I add more to it. I revise it all the time. Um, so yeah, now I have a
And
whole psychological assessment, and now I also have a physical assessment that I do with them as well. So
do you find, I guess, when the person goes through the assessments that there's a certain threshold they have to hit to be someone you consider playing with or not?
I would say for them, here's how I think of it is, you know, I back and forth through text, or sometimes I'll call them and talk to them before we meet in person and get an idea of, I mean, I shouldn't use this word because I know better, but I see how crazy they are, right? Because there's a lot of mental illness in the world, but it's it's more pronounced in the BDSM world. And so I don't have patience for that. I have to separate because my clinician, my therapist in me wants to help everyone, but I need to put
Mm,
that aside for my personal life, right? And so by the time we meet, they really met that threshold really of not being like 95% they're already okay. What I'm doing with them in terms of the assessment is finding the boundaries, right?
mm,
So for example, the woman last night, even though she wants to be brutalized and beaten and treated like shit, she needs afterwards the aftercare to be held, to be praised, to be told this and that. You ask about certain words that you don't want to say, certain places you don't want to touch. So that's what really the assessment becomes. It becomes one a kind of a intimacy building experience, but also
mm,
a boundary setting. It's kind of the negotiation that occurs in BDS of what is okay, what's not okay. And then again,
mm,
part of my assessment is talking about safe words and then implementing the safe words, right? So an example might be, you know, I'm going to pinch your nipple, and the safe words, to be clear, usually are red and yellow. Yellow being slow down, stop, or slow down. Red being stop, the whole thing, right? And so I'll say, I'm going to pinch your nipple because most women like that in the BDSM. Let me know when this is a yellow. They'll say yellow. Let me know when this is a red. And so now we're practicing, right? So that when we actually are in the scene, everyone knows. Because my experiences with what just feedback would have gone is it's just a given. Oh, red and so you know to say red and yellow, and they just go and they play. Or hey, there may not even be a boundary conversation. Or they might say, okay, my
mm,
boundary is don't no feces and no blood or whatever, and that's it. And I promise you, that is never the only boundaries a person has. They might say that in passing, but if you discuss it with them, you find there's a lot more. And so by not doing that, like a lot of people don't, what ends up happening is you accidentally cross a boundary and then you
mm.
create a trauma. And I avoid that as much as I can.
Mm. So, I mean, there's one thing to have the assessment, and there's one thing to get them to talk, and then there's the other thing to get them to talk about it. So, you have these assessments, you have all these procedures in place, but how do you also get them comfortable enough to open up to share these really vulnerable and personal
I mean, I
information
think
about
part of it,
themselves?
yeah, it's a good question. It's hard to explain because it's a lot, my personality is part of it. My background is, very inviting. I almost always invite them over for dinner. I make them dinner myself. I sit with them and we talk completely casual conversations. We don't talk about anything like this. And I say to them first, you're my friend, and that's all you are right now, and think nothing else of it. And just to approach it as, because a lot of people are nervous and they're scared and they're afraid of I think discussing the fears ahead of time, right? Saying, what are your fears about this? Like just bring it all up in the front kind of creates safety, right? We're
Mm,
both now aware of the fears. We've both processed the fears and we both have an idea of, one of my questions is, if you get scared, if you start crying, what do you want me to do? Right. And so now there's a safety net that's created before anything is even done, before they've
mm.
ever been touched. And I think that creates the safety they need in this and the comfort to do. Again, by the end of the conversation, the assessment could have done whatever I wanted to, and I don't. But that's the kind of level of safety I enjoy getting people into.
That's amazing. I mean, obviously, your background helps create that experience, but let's make it even a little bit personal. You've spoken a bit about your partner. You've been together for a while now, and how? Because you mentioned seeing different people over time. How did you narrow it down to one? How did you, I guess, form this partnership you have now?
Well, originally she contacted me on an app because she saw my background, and this is about 2 years ago. And she's like, "Hey, you seem like you could help me get some threesomes." She's like, "You seem like you know people, so can we go on a date and then you and me and another guy or girl we can have a threesome?" That's what she was looking for. And so I said, "Yeah." And within a couple of weeks, I helped her get comfortable with me and have a threesome, and then a threesome with a man, a threesome with a woman, and so that's all it was. And then afterwards, she was like, and she knew nothing really about the BDSM, um, at least not about the BDSM world, right? And so, after she saw my dungeon and all this stuff and learned more about my background, she's like, "Hey, could you teach me about this world?" And so that's really just how it started, just as another play partner. But as stories go, right, we fell in love, and she became my girlfriend. And then months later, she wanted me to train her formally, right? Which is the whole process. It takes a couple months of training her to be my submissive in a formal sense. And that's another conversation to explain the difference. But then I collared her. That was like more than a year ago. And yeah, so our relationship now is, it's interesting because it's hard to say we're monogamous because obviously we sleep with other people, but we've so far only pretty much only done it with each other, right? So threesomes or foursomes. It's not like she goes off and sleeps with someone and does BDSM with someone and comes back, or I go off and I do it elsewhere, right? It's always together. So, except this Friday, she will be going to by herself with another couple to sleep. So that'll be the first time, I guess, it'll be ethical non-monogamy. Um, but yeah, I'll stop there and let you ask for clarifying questions.
Yeah, no, yeah. Well, there's so many things to unpack there, but I guess you build a relationship. You're where you are. You have this, I guess, circle of safety. It's the two of you, but you're comfortable enough to invite other people in. How did you? I mean, I know you started as like threesomes, but when you became like partners to each other, was that difficult? Still keeping things open? And what was the formal process of, training? What did that look like?
Well, I think because to your first question, I think because our relationship started with threesomes, right? It wasn't that hard. to just keep that going, right? So I would, really it would be led by her for the most part. Sometimes I would ask, but she would say, "Hey, can we have another man or woman involved?" And I would find someone, and whatever we would do it generally together. And so it didn't really affect too much generally. There's always some caveats as far as you know there's a whole conversation to have between the difference between a dominant and a master and a slave and a submissive. But in my case, it's, dominant, submissive. And it's, here's a kind of a thing that I don't think most people think about is there's no rule book. There's no official, this is your submissive. You have been formally trained. You have earned your collar. Those
Mm,
words have meaning in the community, right? That you have been collared, you have trained, right? But those are arbitrary. Um, I know dominants who on the first date with someone will collar them, right? And they will say they've been trained and they've been collared. You know, I have my own process where I don't remember now, but I set 10 goals that we need to achieve through 10 play sessions. And if she didn't achieve these goals, um, then we'd have to do them again, right? And so that was the training process. Some of it was, for example, some of the goals might have been to be degraded, to be humiliated, to be, um, I marked up her entire body with like words, whore, slut, whatever, you know. I usually ask her what she wants, and then the training would be to take her out to the nude beach and have her walk around naked with all these words on her body, right? As a part of humiliation and to be clear, this is stuff that we agreed upon, in the beginning, this is what it would look like. But to actually do it is part of the training. And
mm,
so another one might be pain, a certain threshold. Another one might be, and it goes on, right? So that was our process together, which ends with her getting a really nice collar that we only use for special occasions.
mm, mm. You mentioned that, and it's something I kind of struggle a bit with. Like, what's the difference between humiliation and degradation? Is there even any difference between the two?
In speaking kind of back and forth, people do in LA. No, there's no difference. In my world, there's a big difference. To degrade someone is to, in my kind of world, right, is to objectify them. You are a fuck toy. You are a sex object. You are good to be used, and so you've been degraded into this object.
Mm,
Humiliated to me takes on the role of, you know, it's to put someone down in an emotional sense. And this can differ between each person, right? So, for example, the person last night, I said, "What are some words I want to humiliate you?" Right? I want to call you a useless. I want to, you know, uh, for example, this isn't true, but like, oh, your one breast is, you have ugly breasts, or look at you, how fat your thighs are. Just like these really, really deep marks, I think, is humiliation. Really finding a flaw in a person that they're scared to reveal and to put it out there to humiliate them. So I think the differences for me are a level of injury, right? So within sex, maybe calling someone a fuck toy is degrading them. Humiliate them is really going in deep and exposing them in a way that is really hurtful. Now, again, this is somewhat arbitrary, right? But this is my differentiation between them.
mm. And I find, I mean, so in a way, humiliation is a little bit deeper, a little bit more personal, and a little bit knowing it's specific to the person in a way, versus degradation is a little bit more general, a little bit more
Yeah.
surfacey type of
Yeah, I
thing.
mean, pretty much every girl in this kind of submissive likes being called a fuck toy, or you're only good for your holes, or like these kind of again. Now, to a non BDSM person, those are very foul things to say. I get this, but in a BDSM world, these are just generic things, right? Use that mouth like you're a fucking slut or whatever. Like those are things you degrade them in the moment. Humiliation is to
Mm,
really set the time to do something, um, and to be very clear, I ask them words they'd never want me to say, and I never say them. For example, I asked her, "Are there any words you don't want me to call you?" And she was like, "No, you can call me whatever you want." And I'm like, "Okay, can I call you stupid? Can I call you retarded? Can I call you like?" And I will actually. And she's like, "You know what? don't call me that word, right? Because through experience, I've learned that people will say one thing and you kind of have to just check, right? You have to.
Mm,
This is an experiential thing. And actually,
mm,
just so my partner with me last night, we were going through these things, and she's like, "Huh, why did you do this, or why didn't you do this, even though she asked you to do this?" And I said, I'm like, because that's not what she wanted. And Jess was like, but she said she wanted that. I'm like, sweetie, listen, my partner, my girlfriend, like anyone else, takes things literally. She said, don't do this. She said to do this. And um, I know better. I know what she needs. And again, so there's two problems with what I'm saying. One problem is it's very narcissistic for me to say I know better. And inherently with, you know, any, it's almost a given that a dominant is a narcissist because you have to at some level believe that you know better, right? And there's a lot of problems with that. Um, Another problem is, again, it's arbitrary. Who am I to say I know what's better for you than you, right? Who am I? Uh, I- And I can't just say the ends justify the means. Yes, I was right to do or not to do something they told me to do or not to do, right?
mm,
But that doesn't mean what I did was right. And so I can speak from experience. I can know that she said that she needed this for aftercare. I know she needed something else, and I was right.
mm,
But how do you explain that to someone without s- inherently breaking someone's word, right? So they told me to do this and I did something else. I can't justify that other than say my experience. But
mm,
that's the problem is I have, not only do I have an ethical, right, I'm licensed, I have an ethical responsibility. I mean, she's not my patient, so really I don't. But if I do something illegal, it could be go against my license. But the other thing is, I have a personal responsibility. I have a responsibility to BDSM and upholding what I believe is, I find ethics and important. But it's very, very easy. My partner last night, this girl, the new girl, we'll call her Ella. As we were doing the kind of physical assessment, as I'm pitching her nipples, pulling her hair, choking her, she starts going into what we call subspace, or this very submissive kind of like, almost like she's high and kind of like. And I looked at my partner and I said, "Look at this. I could do anything I wanted to her right now. She would let me and she would love it, but I'm not going to." And because I have these preset rules where I don't play with someone, you know, in any kind of severe way the first time I meet them. But
mm,
my girlfriend said, "Yeah, you're right. A man could do whatever they wanted to do to this woman, and they would." And so it's a lot of power, I will say, when I was younger, I used it, probably not in the appropriate ways. And so my experience has taught me there are consequences to using this power that you have over people. And so I don't,
mm,
but it's there. And you can imagine, going back to what I said, most DOMs are probably narcissistic inherently with the kind of title. They may take advantage because they think they know better. And again, I
mm.
will say I am not some king. I'm not saying I know everything and that I'm right in what I do. No, there's definitely some issues with how I approach things to say I know what's best. But I will speak from experience.
Mm, mm. And like experience, time, and actually doing the thing also helps. But I'll come back to that. So something came up when you mentioned. So you mentioned master slave, dominant submissive. How would you differentiate the two dynamics?
It taken me a while to really understand the difference. Generally speaking, um, remember, so master and slave go together, and dominant and submissive go together. In a master slave relationship, now remember, we're going to have to split this up into 24/7, right? Is this a constant relationship that they're always in this kind of mindset, or is this only during what we call play of a scene?
Mm,
But in both cases, the difference being, in a master slave relationship, the slave should completely give up who they are as a person and only be what exactly the master says they will be. The
mm,
personality is given up, the free will is given up, everything is given up and they are just this person's plaything. That is a slave.
Mm,
Again, broadly speaking. A submissive, like my partner when we're playing, is someone who knows the rules, but within play has their own personality, who may backtalk, who may say they want certain things, who will ask, right? For example, part of my rules I have is, you will do what I say, but if you can't, you will tell me why.
mm,
In a slave master relationship, again, that's not a, it's you do what I say, period. Right. So, and my submissive has the ability to ask for something, say, hey, can we do this? Even though they're in a submissive role, they have, there's
mm,
a formality about it. So there's a more on a clinical level, it's basically giving up who you are as a person as a slave. Submissive is following rules. That's how I see it.
And like, I mean, with all the care and processes and procedures you have, the assessment, all that things, and knowing, just kind of like sensing what this person needs and all that power and the responsibility that you wield it with, would you not be leaning more to the master slave versus the dominant submissive?
How that ends up occurring is as well. Me personally, no. I am very, very much a person who believes that you must have a sense of yourself at all times. I do not
Mm,
like it when a person gives up their sense of self and becomes either another person or no person at all, right? And that's something that's hard to think about is that they are no longer, in their perspective, they want to have no thoughts and be this kind of free floating ball of nothingness that is being used. I
mm,
don't care for that. I rather have a back and forth. I rather have someone say, do something kind of half-assedly so give me a reason to punish them for fun, right? There's a lot of joy in what I do. There's a lot of humor. It's meant to be fun and playful, but also serious when it needs to be. That's kind of my personality.
mm.
But
Let's talk about, yeah, go ahead.
but that girl last night, when I kind of turned her on and got her aroused, she mentality of a slave. Like
Mm,
she does not have, even if I wanted it, she doesn't really have a sense of self when she is aroused and in a submissive mind state. Her personality becomes like a slave and she is lost in the moment. And so in
mm,
that sense, she can't have a personality. She can't fight. She can't argue. She can't have this playfulness that I enjoy.
mm,
Uh, So there's also it doesn't, maybe sometimes it doesn't matter what I want, right? Some people are just going to be inherently more submissive or more slave like. And the same thing with
mm,
doms and slaves, right? So again, a little bit arbitrary, a little bit of kind of fluid, but I prefer
mm.
people to be their own person.
That's why I asked that question, because when you're mentioning like you just did a few things and she traveled to this place, it was like, well, you can shape the person as you want. But yeah, let's talk about the dungeon. How long have you been building it out, and what do you love about the space you've created?
You have to remind me the last part of your question because I'm going to talk for a little bit. I'll probably forget. But
Yeah, no, all good. The dungeon, how long did it take you to get it to where it's at, and what do you love about the space you've built so far?
okay. Um, like I think you can imagine, I started out with a couple of things. God knows, probably there was just like handcuffs and leash and collar kind of thing, and then you put that in a drawer, right? And then eventually I get enough stuff, and my drawer starts getting full. So I'm like, okay, I need a place to put this. I'm gonna hang like a little pegboard in my closet, like this little space, and you hang it all up. Okay, great. And then I get more and more stuff, and so then my closet starts to. I have to start putting stuff on the floor of my closet, and it starts getting full. And so and then I take off half of my bedroom is now this little like corner space of dungeony kind of area.
Yeah.
And so then by the time I move to another home and it's like a big home with like an extra bedroom that you have no use for it. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna put all my BDSM stuff in there.
Mm.
And then, slowly start building it. And so the last three homes I've had where there's been a space, right? I've really made it to a dungeon. And what that looks like, um, is I always paint a wall. So, with my partner, we pick a color and we paint the wall that color. And then there is a lot of the furniture I've built. So we have a sex table, a kneeling bench that has a vibrator that goes on their clit. So when they're being paddled or whipped, for example, they have pleasure. And there's, torture chair. I just finished a St. Andrew's cross yesterday, actually, or 2 days ago. There's this big 8 foot tall cross, that you can tie someone up to. And so I think in terms of like, I've probably spent maybe 10 grand with everything that's in there. But what makes it my own isn't the money I've spent. It's that I put it together and I built a lot of it. Um, and even more than that, I've built a lot of it with my partner, right?
Mm,
So she has
mm,
her own section that she has her own collars that don't go on any other person, her own tools that aren't used on anyone else, and so forth, right? She has her own set of things. And so part of that dungeon is also hers. And so there's that
mm,
community space that we have. Um, and so that when we went in there yesterday with this new person, this was our space and that we created together. And even if I created it without her, it's something that I know where everything is and I know how, right. So it's really, I don't think I hold it sacred, but it's my space that I
mm.
feel comfortable in. And I think my comfort also kind of is kind of experienced by the people around me. That because part of what I've learned is confidence goes a long way with whoever you're with, whether it's male or female. And so having the space that is my own and having the confidence that I know what I'm doing adds to the whole experience.
Amazing. Yo, I mean, I enjoy chats, and I thought this would be a great way to end the conversation. Is like you've had this experience, you built this world with your partner, and inviting people in, sharing your space with them, building community. Someone is now starting, you've done this for years now, but someone is starting recently. They just checked out this episode of the podcast and they're like, oh, well, this is kind of something I'd love to, or be, I think I might be interested in. What advice would you have to share with them?
I'll give the advice to both kind of the submissive and to the dominant, right? So one to the submissive would be um, ask a lot of questions, right? Make sure that you reflect on what you want and what you don't want and be very clear about it. Because there's a lot of people out there that if you don't express explicitly what you want, then they will take advantage of it and use you. And that's just the reality of the world. And that's not just in this kind of space, You need to know what you want and you have to be comfortable, have some power behind what you want and stand by it. And the other would be to a submissive is don't give in to someone just because they make you feel good.
Mm,
Talk to people, talk to a few people, see what they're like. What I tell people is speak to my partners, get some references, right? Talk to those people and see before you give yourself to someone else in this very severe way, get to know the people in their life. Now, listen, a lot of people aren't going to do this, but this is my advice. For
mm,
the dominant side, it was really hard for me because there's really no way to do this. There's no apprenticeship, there's no training manual. Um, it's to be very comfortable making mistakes because you're going to make mistakes. And the best that I can do is limit the mistakes by, again, having a process and having ethics and boundaries. But again, it goes back to asking questions. And so, best advice is to get comfortable that you're going to make mistakes, but own up to them and apologize to the person and say, and that's the thing is there's a lot of confidence, a lot of bravado, but you also have to be vulnerable. And believe it or not, um, most submissives will appreciate a dominant being vulnerable and saying I made a mistake and I shouldn't have done that. Whereas the
mm,
expected role is I know everything, I'm doing everything, I'm in control, I'm in command. You also have to be
mm,
vulnerable. And so
mm,
um and also the other one last thing is to ask other people about for advice. Because I do get men who ask me to train them for their partner, for their wife, and I do. And so ask, I get a lot of messages of, hey, when can I come over and fuck your girl? Or, oh, whatever. But I do get messages and I don't respond to them. But I always respond to a message where someone's asking for help, saying, how can I be better? What can I do? What are some advice you have? I will always respond to that. And so there is a community out there who care, and they want to help, and they want to be there for people. So ask for advice for both subs and doms. I think is the main advice there.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time, Alex. Sharing so much of your knowledge, and super
Of
grateful
course.
you came to the sanctuary today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.